Hello all, this is a part 2 of Chapter 10, Personality. In part 2, we will discuss about trait theories, the Big Five theory, relation between personality and genetics, and last, some ways to assess and measure personality. According to the trait theories, personality consists of enduring disposition, also known as traits. So what are some examples of a trait? Basically, traits are enduring ways of thinking, feelings, or behaving. So if there was an individual who is always negative, this individual may be thinking negatively all the time, focusing on what could go wrong, and probably feeling depressed and present itself as always tired and exhausted. So just now, we came up with terms like negative, depressed, tired, and exhausted. And these could be considered as traits. So how many enduring dispositions or traits do you think there are? As you can imagine, there are many. And you probably could look up in a dictionary and check all the words out there. And actually, that is exactly what Gordon Allport did. At first, they identified 17,953 trait names. And then they gradually cut down to the list to about 4,500 traits. But still, that is a lot. So others attempted to decrease the list, thank goodness. So Cattell reduced the number of traits to 16 with a statistical method called factor analysis, which is basically a method to group similar variables, in this case traits, to smaller groups. So for example, traits such as anxiety and worry could be combined to a single group. So some of the examples of these 16 traits that they identified are reasoning and apprehension. So whether an individual tends to engage in abstract or concrete thinking, and to what extent an individual tends to worry as opposed to feeling confident. And you could actually test how much you endorse based on these 16 traits by taking a test called 16PF test by going to this link, or you could just search 16PF. And there are 164 questions, but it is quite interesting, so I really encourage that you try it out. So what kind of personality characteristics do you think certain occupations would have? For example, a pilot or a writer. So pilots, when compared to a writer, may be more conscientious. So just being careful, diligent, they might be relaxed, self-assured, and probably less sensitive. We don't want our pilots to be constantly anxious and worrying about something. On the other hand, writers may be more imaginative and be able to think abstractly. So based on our personality traits, some jobs might better match with our personality, and this could be a really important thing to consider when choosing our career. And for those of you who think 16 is still too many, there is a big 5. So openness to experience measures how much a person is willing to try out new things, such as traveling to new places or eating new foods. An individual high on conscientiousness is a person who is reliable, hardworking, and is also dependable. Extroversion is individuals who are outgoing and sociable as opposed to introverts who prefer solitude and dislike being the center of attention. A person with high on agreeableness is kind, nice, and trusting. And last, an individual high on neuroticism tends to worry a lot and experience high anxiety and insecurity. And note that these 5 factors are independent of one another. So just because an individual is high or low on openness experience, for example, does not mean the same individual is more likely to be low or high on other big 5 traits. Also, any personality traits could be a strength or weakness. For example, if an individual is too high on agreeableness, then this individual might have a difficult time confronting others when needed. So, Are the big five traits consistent around the world? It has been found that conscientiousness, agreeableness, and extroversion were consistent across cultures. But openness to experience and neuroticism were more likely to emerge only in English-speaking individuals. And as we originally discussed that these traits were based on a word from a dictionary, the reason that some of the big five traits did not emerge in some cultures could be that these words were less represented within that language. Because in some language, there may be more or less words to describe a certain things. How about big five in animals? This might be a stretch, but there are researchers who are exploring the application of big five in animals. I mean, that sounds really fun research. And so to answer the question, yes, there are some big five traits in animals. Among dogs, there were big five traits except for conscientiousness. But obviously, researchers aren't just conducting these studies for fun. Although, again, I do think this is a very interesting topic. So, for example, by conducting these type of research among animals, this may help us to understand the evolution of human personality traits. So the next question on personality is, do genetics have an influence on personality traits? And a field that studies this is called the behavioral genetics. So what do you all think? Do you think genetics have an influence on personality traits? So when examining the influence of genetics, twin research is frequently used, comparing between identical twins and fraternal twins. Identical twins share exactly the same genes, whereas fraternal twins share about 50%. So if the personality traits are more similar between identical twins than the fraternal twins, then that indicates that there is a genetic influence on personality. And it does appear that this is the case as shown in the figure here. As you can see, for all big five traits, the association are higher among the identical twins, which is in orange, compared to fraternal twins, which is in gray. But also note that even among identical twins, the personality traits are not perfectly the same, which implies that there are some other factors that also play a role in shaping our personality traits. So kind of again, going back to the debate of nature versus nurture as we discussed in the human developmental chapter. So how could we assess and measure personality? In this lecture, we will talk about projective tests and self-report tests. And for each, there are multiple methods within these type of tests, and I will introduce some of them. First, I will begin talking about projective tests, which are personality assessments that present ambiguous stimuli and ask to describe it or tell a story about it. So one of the most famous projective tests is the Rorschach ink blot test, which uses 10 ink blots as an ambiguous stimuli as shown here. So what do you see in this ink blot? You might see a butterfly or maybe a mouse, or you might see something else. And these answers are neither right or wrong, but the purpose is to reveal unconscious concerns and personality. So what theory do you think of when hearing the term unconscious? So hopefully you say psychoanalysis or psychodynamic. So many of the projective tests have been influenced by psychoanalysts. Another example of projective test is the thematic apperception test, or TAT, which uses ambiguous situation to elicit stories, as opposed to ink blot, and analyze them to assess unconscious mind and personality. An example of ambiguous situation is this picture as shown here. And the individuals will be asked to create stories looking at these pictures. But there are some limitations with the projective test. First, it is subjective. So concept and impressions may be only valid within a particular therapist's perception. In other words, the responses may be influenced by a therapist's bias, prejudice, and personal experiences. Also, in general, there is no gold standard way of scoring, and therefore resulting in low reliability and validity. In other words, we aren't sure if these projective tests are actually measuring personality traits and whether we could replicate these results when tested again. And this is important because if measuring personality, then these results should not change very often. And also, regarding the no standard grading scales, I say in general because historically there was no guideline in scoring. But as people have recognized these limitations, some have actually developed some ways of quantifying these projective tests. Last, I will talk about self-report tests, which is also known as objective tests or personality inventory. And it directly asks whether specific items describe their personality traits. So similar to projective tests, there are many types of self-report tests. And one of them is called the NEOPI, or the Neuroticism Extroversion Openness Personality Inventory. Quite a mouthful. But NEOPI has a high face validity, meaning that the item being asked fits the trait that is being measured. So can anyone guess what an item, I am a warrior, is measuring among the big 5 traits? Yes, if you said neuroticism, you're right. And this may cause an issue actually, because individuals might be able to pretend in becoming a person with certain personality traits. MMPI, on the other hand, actually have ways of detecting whether a person is lying. And MMPI was designed to detect abnormal personality tendencies. And MMPI is most widely used self-report personality test. And MMPI can also be used for making hiring decisions and also in forensic settings. So when taking MMPI, an individual probably should not present themselves as being too good or too bad because it will show on the results. And MMPI has been revised every now and then. And currently the most updated version is the MMPI 3, which just came out in 2020. And again, there are many other personality inventory other than NEOPI and MMPI. So that is all I have for the semester. And like always, let me know if you have any questions. And I just want to appreciate all of you attending the lecture through online. And hopefully you stay safe and healthy. And if you have any questions regarding career in psychology down the road, feel free to email me. Thanks and take care.